You're listening to episode 80 of Liz's Healthy Table.
Looking for a healthy new way to feed your family without the hassle and hype? Welcome to Liz's Healthy Table, where your host, registered dietitian nutritionist Liz Weiss, serves up fresh and flavorful recipes with a tasty side of science, good nutrition, and fun. Are you and your family ready for some wholesome food that tastes great too? Don't change that dial. Your food adventure starts here.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone. This week's show is all about inflammation. What is it? What role does it play in gut health and cancer and heart disease? And what can we eat to keep inflammation at bay? Hint, hint. Berries, green leafy vegetables, salmon, and olive oil are about to become your best friends. So I must say I've been a bit of a stranger lately. I took a few weeks off. I've been working, don't get me wrong, but I just have not had it in me, I guess is the best word, to get a podcast episode up and running. And I think I just can't get focused. Can you relate to this? I just feel like I am all over the place these days. And it's probably because every day is feeling like Groundhog Day. And I don't know, maybe I just need a change of scenery or something, but I feel like I'm back. I'm back. And September is going to be very exciting. I've got lots of cool things that I'm going to be doing, lots of videos I'm going to be shooting. And I've got so many podcasts that I am recording that are going to be phenomenal. I'm going to be talking about family meals in September. I'll be talking about the menopause diet for those of you who need that. I've got a show coming up about the DASH diet, which is a diet to reduce hypertension, but it's a diet that we would all benefit from. Anyway, so many great shows coming up, and I'm very excited. I feel rejuvenated, regenerated. I've got my big birthday coming up. Remember, this was my year of celebration. I'm finally just about 10 days shy of the big birthday. So lots going on. And I feel like, I'm back. I'm excited. I was talking to my mother-in-law today and she said, she's in England, Liz, where are your recipes? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't sent a newsletter out in like 4 weeks. I said, Joy, this week, don't you worry. You'll be getting your newsletter and I'll be sharing some new recipes, including the recipes we're going to talk about on today's show. So let's get into it. My guest today is Carolyn Williams. She's a PhD. She's a registered dietitian. She is a culinary nutrition expert and author of Meals That Heal, 100 Everyday Anti-Inflammatory Recipes in 30 minutes or less. Wow, that's a mouthful. Meals That Heal. I love this cookbook because the recipes are simple, easy. They feature so many of my favorite foods and they are family friendly. So Carolyn Williams received a 2017 James Beard Journalism Award, and her work is regularly featured in top magazines, Cooking Light, Eating Well, Real Simple, All Recipes, and Prevention. She teaches culinary arts and nutrition classes at a local community college where she is a tenured faculty member, and she lives in Tuscaloosa, Alabama with her 2 children, Madeline and Griffin. So I interviewed Carolyn pre-COVID and, just in time for back to school, I'm posting this show and you're going to get lots of really great healthy recipe ideas. And I don't know why it took me so long to get this show up and running, but I just kind of shared with you. I've been, I've needed to get kind of revived and revved up again. So anyway, I'm super excited about this show because on this episode, we talk about some phenomenal recipes. One of Carolyn's recipes in the cookbook is for avocado and tomato chicken salad. I make it with rotisserie chicken. I have made it many, many times. I love it. We're going to talk about another salad recipe. This is salmon served over quinoa kale salad. I've been very into salads lately. And then we're going to talk about a dessert in the book. And you're thinking, wait a minute, dessert, how can that be? Well, she makes these peanut butter chocolate chip cookie dough bites with chickpeas. Very creative recipe. So I will be sharing links to Carolyn on her website and Carolyn on social media. And I took a few photos from the book and I'm going to post those photos of these recipes and just post them right into the show notes from today's episode. So just head on over to lizshealthytable.com/podcast, and you'll be able to get access to the recipes that we talk about on the podcast. As always, if you enjoy this week's show, tell a friend about it. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And you are always welcome to write a review on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. And now, finally, after all this time, my interview with Carolyn Williams. Hey, Carolyn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Liz.
Well, it is just such a pleasure because I'm sitting here looking at your stunning book, Meals That Heal. But before we get into it, I just wanted you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Your mom, where do you live, your website. Give us the Carolyn story.
Okay. I am based in Alabama, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, actually. And so down south, and I'm from the South. I have two kids, a 7th grader and a 3rd grader. So never really a dull moment around my house. And I say my day job or my full-time job is I am a college professor at a local college, and I teach nutrition and culinary arts classes. But kind of my passion and what's grown to be almost comparable in work is kind of the freelance and the side work that I do, writing and developing recipes for brands like Cooking Light and Eating Well and Real Simple, and just kind of having fun trying to break down some of that. There's so much nutrition stuff in the media, and I think it really confuses people. Even I get confused, and I'm a dietitian, so I just try to simplify things. What does this new study mean for you when you go to the grocery store tonight? Here's what it means, for you and your family. So that's really kind of where my passion's grown and work has grown, and recently released this cookbook, Meals That Heal, this summer. And so I've been traveling and sharing that. And actually it's a topic, I know we'll get into it later, but it's a topic I wasn't even on my radar a couple of years ago. And now I'm just kind of fully immersed in it and believe in it, just because it affects so many people.
Yeah, we definitely are going to dig into that. And, you mentioned that you lived in Alabama. Of course, I hear that Southern accent. And I lived in Atlanta. So I had some time down in the South. I know that football is a big thing for you guys. Here we are in New England. I live in New England, and it's all about, the Patriots. But I know you guys, it's like Alabama versus Auburn. Every now and then I'll catch some of that online. I'll see like on Twitter. What's that trending there? Are you an Alabama fan? Are you an Auburn fan?
Yes, I'm an Alabama fan. We recently had a pretty bad loss, it was a tight game. But yes, I'm Alabama. Tuscaloosa is where the University of Alabama is. So it helps to be an Alabama fan when you live in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah. I was on an airplane. I think I was flying home from San Francisco, and I met the loveliest couple. He was a professor, I think in economics at Tuscaloosa. He had just gotten transferred maybe a year or two earlier. And this woman, who was a Yankee, just like I am, she said she loved living down there. She joined some club, and it was on a lake, and she said they had tailgate parties all the time, and she said these tailgate parties, they would have like Bloody Mary bars. I'm like, I've never heard of this. So she was loving living down there. For all I know, you're friends with her, but I forget her name. So she said that she and her friends did this thing maybe every month, where each woman would individually plan like a mystery day trip somewhere and surprise the friends. Yeah, she's into it. She was really.
I think I need to get to know her.
I know. I wish I had her card. I would connect you guys. So, I'm always curious about where people's love of food and nutrition comes from. The last couple of podcasts I've had, it seems like the dads were just rocking it. So everyone was like, oh yeah, I cooked with my dad. I'm like, really? Personally, my dad never cooked. I think maybe he made an omelet one day of his life. It's always about my mom, but I'm curious, you've won a James Beard Award. I'm like, where'd your love of food come from?
I don't know if you've ever gotten this answer before, but I don't really have my first cooking memories in the kitchen. My first cooking memories are me running a restaurant, making mud pies out in the backyard while my parents, I guess they grilled and cooked out. But like at 4, my mom jokes I was running Mrs. Sarducci's restaurant making mud pies and serving them up. And so I just think I always liked just the dining maybe experience. And then I slowly got into the kitchen. And my mom cooked, but I think I was just, I kind of had a natural interest in food. And then I have my younger brothers are a good bit younger than me. So I kind of lived an only child life for a little bit. So my parents took me, on trips with them and, didn't think twice about going to nice restaurants. So the exposure I got, I think, once you have more than one child, you're like, no way, we're not taking two kids. The exposure to restaurants, like down in New Orleans, I think really, just piqued my interest even more. And then I would have to say, I always loved cooking, but nutrition probably came later. And, I've always wondered this, but I kind of have a hypothesis that probably a lot of dietitians get into nutrition similarly to how I did, but it was based out of my own needs and just wanting to understand and like, this isn't adding up. How does this work in my body? And so it was kind of more just me wanting to learn about nutrition related things and how it affected me. And then realizing, wow, I didn't realize this could actually be a profession. Let's check out this major.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Carolyn, when I was a kid, when we made mud pies in the backyard, it was like a rock surrounded by mud that we would throw at the boys who we did not like in the neighborhood. I mean, this is like a true confession time for me, and I can't even believe I'm admitting this to everybody. When you say mud pies, I think you're probably describing a different type of mud pie. Perhaps.
Oh, yes. I was not going to waste my mud pie throwing it on a boy. No, it was a masterpiece.
What's your mud pie made of?
Beautifully arranged and decorated, so just an assortment of whatever, I could find in the backyard. So
same organic material made out of dirt, but you just were not throwing that at the boys in the neighborhood.
No,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Just double checking. And maybe I never did throw one of those mud pies. Maybe I'm imagining that I actually dreamt of doing it and wanted to do it, but maybe I never did because I was pretty well behaved. But there might have been one. There might have been one mud pie thrown. I apologize. I apologize to little Johnny who was cycling by at the time, torturing the girls in the neighborhood. So Carolyn, you have written this beautiful book. It's called Meals That Heal, 100 plus everyday anti-inflammatory recipes in 30 minutes or less. I like the 30 minutes or less. And then you have this subheading, gut health, brain health, cancer prevention, heart health. Wow. This is like the book everybody needs, because who wants to get, heart disease, and we all want our brains to be healthy. So just tell us a little bit about Meals That Heal. And most importantly, it's an anti-inflammatory cookbook. So what's inflammation? It sounds dreadful because
right?
Yeah.
I know it's, inflammation is not something that was even on my radar a couple of years ago. If you told me I would write a cookbook on it, I would have said, what? But, you named all those things on the cover, gut health, brain health, cancer. Inflammation in the body is really at the root of almost every single condition, but particularly those top ones that are affecting the population today, like type 2 diabetes and cancer. And heart disease and autoimmune conditions. So inflammation, though, and I'll be really super simple in my scientific terms. Inflammation is a natural function of the immune system. It is there. It is designed to keep you healthy. And that is when it works right.
Of course, when it works right. Yeah, yeah.
So think about like you sprain your ankle or you get a paper cut. Okay. Maybe that cut starts hurting and gets a little red and swollen, but you can tell it's healing. And then slowly, a few days later, that redness dissipates and your cut is healed and it's gone. Or same for your ankle. It may get a little swollen and hurt, but it goes away. That's acute inflammation, and that is a healthy reaction by the immune system. That's how it's supposed to work. Inflammation is supposed to come when you're hurt and your body needs healing, or you need to fight off a bacteria. It runs in and it fixes the problem, and then it dissipates and leaves. So that's the way our immune system is designed to work. What has happened, and what the bad kind of inflammation, if you will, is a type that's a lot more subtle. It's very vague. There's no cut and dry symptoms like, oh yes, you have inflammation, low-grade inflammation. It is caused by irritants in the environment, in the food. It can be caused by stress, but it's inflammation that is triggered by something that's irritating the body. So it's kind of like a low grade, just irritant in the body, making the body hypersensitive and a little more reactive to things than it would normally be. And it stays there. So you don't really know you have it, but you may just have a little bit of low grade inflammation. But then let's say you go through a really stressful period, or you go through a phase where you're traveling and eat a ton of fast food. That inflammation can build on itself. And it really is in that low-grade inflammation that kind of slowly builds in the body that pushes you towards maybe a predisposition for an autoimmune disease, or maybe your blood sugar was slightly elevated, but, as the inflammation increases, it might push you a little more towards a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes.
So this inflammation is there. It's chronic. It's always there. And then it ultimately, we break down. I mean, and one thing that sort of comes to my mind, like, let's say you have a job that's, really, really, really stressful, and you're living in this chronic state of stress. Over the years, it just eats away at you. And before you know it, you have high blood pressure. And before you know it, you have heart disease. And it just is this cascade of.
Exactly. And we don't usually, someone might have high blood pressure and high glucose, and then before you know it, they, have type 2 diabetes, or, a lot of times we don't connect all these little things that start occurring. We just think, oh, we're stressed at work. Oh, my blood sugar's a little high, or, oh, my digestive system's been bothering me a little and it doesn't normally. But all these things are usually underlying of a bigger issue or some inflammation in the body.
So, regardless of, let's say, forget smoking, because that's like horrible for inflammation. And I know my listeners are probably not smokers because we all try to eat a healthy diet, but we can look at diet and say, there are certain foods in the diet that can make inflammation worse. And there are some foods in the diet that can help to reduce inflammation. And that's really the premise of your book. So before we talk about all the good foods, are there certain foods that people, families, kids, everybody should sort of be avoiding because they might actually make inflammation worse? And it seems like it's this kind of silent disease, if you will, or silent scenario, where we don't even know it's happening in our bodies. But if we can prevent it, why not? So what are those foods that we should avoid?
Well, everything in moderation, right? I don't want to say you have to, totally take everything off the block. But our food system is not set up really to prevent us from getting inflammation. So inflammation is linked to your fast food and your fried foods, particularly like your processed foods with added sugars. Those extra ingredients that you may look at on the back of a label and don't know how to pronounce. It's those extra chemicals, those extra compounds that aren't usually naturally in food. They may not irritate you, but they could potentially. And so just, eating more whole food. And I tell people, no, I do not make everything from scratch by any means at all. But buying more minimally processed foods. That's what I like to tell people, is minimally processed foods. So, if you go to the grocery store and need to buy a jar of spaghetti sauce, look at that spaghetti sauce and let's find one that has, not too many ingredients. The typical rule of thumb you sometimes hear is 5 or less. But, a minimum amount of ingredients. But then are they ingredients that you recognize and can pronounce? Mm-hmm. And then my third one is, if I were to make a spaghetti sauce at home from a recipe, would these ingredients be in it? And so that's kind of my little checklist. And, if you find a product like that says tomatoes and basil and olive oil, and salt and pepper, hey, that's a decent product. That's a processed food product that I would probably feel comfortable buying. So that's what I mean by minimally processed.
Mm-hmm, sure. And beans, like if you look at canned beans or orange juice or whole wheat pasta, I mean, they're all minimally processed.
Exactly.
But it's those like really, sugary, fatty, white floury, kind of heavily processed foods that you're saying can actually make inflammation worse in our bodies.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what foods, are there any sort of secret foods, magic foods? What types of foods should we all be striving to eat more of? And what types of foods do you outline in Meals That Heal?
There are really, I kind of did a complete just review of the research and what was out there. And there are 8 kind of foods or groups of foods that there's really pretty substantial research their power to reduce inflammation and prevent disease or soothe inflammation in the body. They're leafy greens. Leafy greens really are just trying to get a cup of those in a day at least. Olive oil, making kind of your go-to oil, extra virgin olive oil. It's got a compound in it that other oils don't have that is a natural anti-inflammatory or inflammation suppressing compound. Berries.
Oh, they always come up on top, those berries.
They do.
They're such winners, the berries.
Well, they're loaded, they're bright, their rich purple red color tells you that they're loaded with antioxidants and phytochemicals, which that's good for inflammation because that fights off the free radicals in your body to help reduce inflammation from those. But then they're also packed with fiber, and they aren't going to put your blood sugar, cause kind of roller coasters with your blood sugar, those ups and downs. They have a lower glycemic index, and maintaining, kind of avoiding those peaks and dips is key for inflammation as well. Inflammation rises in the body when you constantly have that sugar high and then that downward, fall. The other one is cruciferous vegetables, like your broccoli and Brussels and cauliflower, like all those vegetables, that family of vegetables that usually stinks when you cook them. Arugula is in that group, collard greens, bok choy. But that smell that you're smelling is sulfur, and it's a sulfur compound or several sulfur compounds in there that actually have some pretty powerful effects on reducing inflammatory markers, particularly inflammation in regards to cancer and cancer cell development.
Okay, so we've got the leafy greens, the berries, the olive oil, the cruciferous vegetables, and I know we've heard over the years about their power in lowering cancer risk, so that's good. I've been eating all these foods. I'm so proud of myself right now.
Oh, good. See, the list isn't too bad. We can do this.
I know. Listen, we totally can do this. All right, what else? Give us the last 4 on the list.
So fatty fish, like your salmon, your cold water fish that tends to have a little more fat. And really, somebody asked me the other day, I just don't like fish. It's really those omega-3s that are in that fish. So it's really the omega-3s that have such a powerful effect. Omega-3s really soothe inflammation in the body. So just, get omega-3s however you need to. Green tea, really all teas, but green, there's a lot of research on green tea because of its antioxidants in there. It may reduce inflammation related to Alzheimer's and cancer and can help promote the growth of some good bacteria in the gut. And now that we're talking about the gut, the 7th one is things that gut health promoters is what I call it in the book. But cultured foods, fermented foods, anything with a live bacteria culture. So like your yogurt, your kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut, anything that, provides that live bacteria to help repopulate the good bacteria in your gut. And then lastly, number 8 is nuts and seeds. They are packed usually with omega-3s and antioxidants like vitamin E, but also they're just a great balance of protein, carbs. They have minimal carbs, but they're slow digesting and they've got some fiber. And again, it's good for blood sugar regulation, particularly if, you tend to be sensitive to foods, causing your blood sugar to run high.
So we want to keep that blood sugar in check. So today I had these pecan halves. Do you call them pecans or pecans?
I call them pecans.
Pecans. Okay. Because I grew up calling them pecans. Can you believe that? And then when I moved down south, everybody called them pecans. So now I call them pecans. I think most people call them pecans. I think so, but I don't hear anyone calling them pecans anymore. That must have been like a childhood thing. I have to ask my mom if she still calls them pecans. But anyway, so I had these pecan halves and I toasted them in the oven, just on a baking sheet. And then I found this Ina Garten recipe, which I sort of adapted. I think it was for cashews, but basically I chopped up rosemary, fresh rosemary, and I tossed that in with some melted butter. And I don't think I had like real butter. It was one of those buttery kind of healthier spreads, but some melted butter, the rosemary, some salt, a teeny bit of brown sugar, and then it called for cayenne pepper, and I didn't have any. So I found some other spicy thing. I threw that in, and then I just stirred it all up, and I used kosher salt, stirred it all up, and it made this fun little sort of spicy, herby kind of flavory coating, on the nuts. Oh my gosh. So delicious.
That sounds wonderful.
Oh my gosh.
That sounds wonderful.
I could live on nuts. So all these foods that you mentioned are so yummy and versatile and so good. And I'm curious because you mentioned the fermented foods, but how does a healthy microbiome, and I have talked about the microbiome on the podcast. In fact, I did a 2-part series on probiotics and gut health, but how do fermented foods and a healthy gut microbiome, how does that help to keep inflammation in check? What's that connection?
Yeah. I think we're so pro gut health and we know we need to eat healthy for our guts, but I'm not sure, a lot of people get how that really is directly connected to your health. And it really is kind of through inflammation. So when you have a, quote, healthy gut, you've got a good variety and diversity of those good bacteria. And they're in the lining of your GI tract. Your GI tract is designed for when you digest food, break it down into its individual nutrients and pieces. Your GI tract is designed to absorb those nutrients through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream. And when you have a healthy gut with that, good diversity of bacteria and ample amounts, those good bacteria allow those nutrients to go through into the bloodstream, but not much else. Now, when you don't have as many good bacteria in your gut or don't have a good diversity, your lining, that protective lining from the good bacteria isn't as strong. So when you absorb those nutrients from food into your bloodstream, you've almost got gaps or holes where other things can also flow through the intestinal wall. If you hear, people like to use the term leaky gut, and that's essentially what they're referring to. But because you don't have that, healthy lining of those good bacteria, a lot of other stuff that may be in your food that you normally wouldn't absorb can be absorbed through your intestinal wall into the body.
And that could cause inflammation because it irritates you. It's like, whoa, that shouldn't have gotten through, but it did. And now your body is irritated by it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So all these foods you listed, which contain fiber and of course the fermented foods that naturally contain bacteria, that's all part of this plan to keep the gut healthy.
Yeah. They all work in different ways. We want to strengthen the gut and get it healthier so you're not, absorbing as much junk and just the good nutrients. But then, this group of 8 foods, they're strengthening the gut, but then also they are fighting inflammation in other ways. Sometimes it's through antioxidants, sometimes it's like through the omega-3s, soothing properties, so they all have different kind of effects or ways of fighting inflammation in the body. And, when used together, they can really be pretty powerful in reducing inflammation.
Yeah, you explain it. It's just so fascinating, because like you said, the mechanism by which the omega-3s work is very different than the mechanism by which, a high fiber food might work in controlling your blood sugar. So it's so cool. Like everything's working together. It's not like there's one magic food or one magic pill. It's this synergy of all these really great healthy foods and of course, healthy lifestyle, all working together to keep inflammation down. And that's the goal of your book and the goal with your recipes. And I will say, I've been reading through your book and I love the recipes. And I want to talk about a few of them. But before that, something just popped into my head. So I just want to ask you a question about my own personal health and this inflammation that I think I've been having. All right. Tell me what you think. I know you're not a doctor. I always say I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. So here you go, Carolyn, as the inflammation expert. I was having all these arthritic symptoms, like my hands would feel stiff in the morning and my elbows hurt and my feet hurt. I mean, I do have arthritis in my feet naturally, but like more rheumatoid kind of feeling arthritis, like inflammatory arthritis. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to just go off of dairy and gluten for a couple of weeks and see what happens. So I did. And it was very difficult because I actually really love dairy. Gluten, I can, live without. I love whole grains. There's many gluten-free whole grains out there. Anyway, I felt great. I gave up the dairy. I gave up the gluten. Boom, felt great. So then 2 weeks goes by, I reintroduced the dairy and I'm still feeling great. So now I thought, all right, maybe it was the gluten. Maybe my body just developed like an intolerance to it, because I know my body, right? We all know our bodies. Do you think though, like, give me that gluten connection and, would we find gluten in your book? And why would gluten for me potentially cause, again, it's just my theory, a little trial and error, but why would that cause inflammation when my whole life I've been eating gluten without a problem?
Well, let me give you my diagnosis.
Yes, ma'am.
What
Thank you, doctor.
is going on. This issue flared up right after I saw you earlier this fall when you were traveling, right?
Well, no, I'd been feeling it. Yeah, but no, I had been feeling it for well over a year.
For a while.
I was complaining a lot about it. And I was just like, I've got to do something. And that's when I just kind of went cold turkey on the dairy and gluten. I should have done one at a time, I realized. But yeah, after I introduced the dairy back, I was fine. And I really have not introduced the gluten back.
Well, so here's what I found. Some people can tell they have a direct that dairy or gluten will, has a direct inflammatory effect. But what I've also found is, like, when your body is stressed or when your body has some existing inflammation to it, remember I mentioned how it makes your body hypersensitive?
Sure.
So if there's stress or other things going on or something irritating the body that's leading to some kind of inflammation, and again, remember, it's very subtle, so you may not be able to pick up exactly on what it is. But what I've noticed is that things like dairy and gluten may bother people then, when normally when their body's calm and chilled out and inflammation's lower, dairy and gluten wouldn't normally bother them. But when the body's already a little irritated, then it's hypersensitive, and dairy and gluten can bother it. So this sounds similar, kind of, maybe you just needed to kind of just let your body chill out and, just take a break. And then, like you said, I'm so excited to know that when you added dairy back, because dairy's hard to cut out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was doing the oat milk in my coffee, and that was the closest I came to dairy milk, but I love milk in my coffee. Ooh, and I love my Greek yogurt. And I've had a little gluten here and there. Like the other night, I was at a fundraiser and they were passing around hors d'oeuvres, including pig in a blanket. And I could not resist the pig in a blanket. I ate it. And then I realized, oh, well, that's just wrapped in breading. And I'm fine. The next day I thought, oh, am I going to wake up and feel it? I was fine. So yeah, maybe I just needed to kind of calm things down, and maybe I can reintroduce it now without an issue. But somehow that big, gluten molecule somehow I think was the culprit. But it's remarkable how much better I feel.
Yeah. And, you ask about dairy and gluten in the book, and, I try to give people some steps for, okay, what do they want to do if they want to slowly change their diet? I do suggest that maybe they cut out dairy and gluten, but not for long term, just for a few weeks, and then add them back just as you did to see if you can tell a difference. And I believe every recipe in the book is gluten-free, and then most are dairy-free. If they're not dairy-free, I do love some cheese and a little butter at times. But if they're not dairy-free, I always give a dairy-free alternative. Okay.
So they are good. So everything is gluten-free, you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't even realize they were. Well, like, for example, I just opened the book to page 172 to a recipe I made. I made some modifications to it because I didn't have grapes available at the time, but I will tell you that your book, the recipes are so easy, it's absurd. Okay. So this is a recipe for salmon over kale quinoa salad. And it's made with salmon. And, you talked about the omega-3s. And it's made with kale and cooked quinoa, and I'm lazy. I get the Trader Joe's frozen. I cook it in the microwave, and it calls for your citrus vinaigrette and also seedless red grapes cut in half. You could use little bits of apple too, I think. Yeah. And it's so yummy. And this is like the easiest thing. I go to Trader Joe's, I get the salmon, I pop it in the oven, I get the frozen quinoa. Oh, am I lazy? But that's a good lazy. And then it's delicious. And then you've got this vinaigrette, and you have these vinaigrettes. Let's see, I got to find the page here, but you have a whole bunch of vinaigrettes that you provide. Oh, here we go. Mason jar vinaigrettes. Doesn't everybody always say, I want to make salad dressing. How should I make it? I want to do it from scratch. You have this whole page of mason jar vinaigrettes. This is how I like to make my vinaigrettes. Just put everything in a mason jar and shake it up.
Yeah, it's so easy. And you usually have all the ingredients you need already in your pantry.
You've got this citrus vinaigrette, which is basically oil, orange juice, Dijon mustard, and salt and pepper. I mean, how easy is that? Or lemon juice. Yeah, let me see. Oh, that's flavor booster. Yes. Let me go back. So you've got 3 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice, 6 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. And then your flavor boosters are things like orange juice, which I love that. The orange juice, lemon juice. How fun is that? Mm-hmm. Dijon mustard, salt and pepper. Delish.
Yeah.
And you know what else Trader Joe's has? They have a champagne vinegar that's infused with orange.
Oh.
Like an orangey,
wow.
It's an orangey champagne vinegar. And that is what I added to this vinaigrette.
Oh, I'll have to try that.
Oh my gosh. I love it. So that's like one example of a recipe in the book that's absurdly easy. And then you have another recipe on page 105. So I make this the other day. I have to tell everybody, it says it serves 4. So I cut the recipe in half, but then I literally ate 2 portions because that's how good it was. I'm like, all right, I'm not eating half of this. I'm eating the entire thing. I'm starving. And my husband doesn't eat chicken. It was a recipe for avocado chicken salad. And I am actually making it tonight with shrimp. So I was hoping on page 105, Carolyn, I'm assuming you have the book in front of you.
Yes, I do.
Can you please talk everybody through your insanely yummy recipe for avocado chicken salad? Yes,
this is one of my favorites. And again, I try to make it super, super simple. So you just take some cooked shredded chicken, which, if you don't want to cook your own, you can pull off a rotisserie chicken.
That's what I did.
Yeah. And then some cherry tomatoes that you quarter and some scallions and then a ripe avocado. That's kind of the key, and a little lime juice and olive oil and salt and a touch of cumin. And you just toss it together and it's just a delicious, creamy chicken salad. It's really one of my favorites. And just quick and easy, too, for lunch. You can throw it together in just a matter of minutes.
And one of the things you do in that recipe is that part of the avocado gets diced up, but then part of it gets smashed, mixed with olive oil, lime juice, salt, and cumin. And that's the dressing. So so easy. So yummy. And I had bought this rotisserie chicken, which of course is such a convenient thing to always have in the fridge, and just created this. And then I served it over some greens. I think I'm going to serve it over arugula tonight. We're actually having some friends over for dinner. And I always talk about this, Carolyn, on my podcast, that whenever I get a new cookbook, if I'm having people over for dinner or a little dinner party, I will do like the whole dinner party out of that book. So tonight, your avocado chicken salad is becoming an avocado shrimp salad. And I'm such a Trader Joe's junkie. I went to Trader Joe's and got the frozen shrimp, peeled, of course, tail on, and I'll cook them up. And that's what I will use instead of the chicken.
Oh, I love it. I can't wait to hear how that is. I'll have to try it.
It's a nice little hack, and I will share it on Instagram, and I will tag you so you will see. Is there a recipe in the book that your kids, you would say, love the most? We've been talking about all these healthy, yummy foods, and I'm sort of curious, do your kids eat well? Do they buy into all these healthy, yummy foods that you're cooking up all the time?
I'm not going to lie. They're not perfect eaters by any means.
Come on.
Just because you're a dietitian does not mean it's any easier getting your kids to eat healthy. But they do have to, dinner's what I put in front of them. One dinner that they really do like is the zucchini taco skillet, which is almost like a taco mac kind of dish, but with zucchini noodles instead of pasta. And they like that one. There is a yogurt bark that you freeze. So it's almost like chocolate bark, but it's made with yogurt and put berries and granola in it. They like that. It's almost like they're getting to have a little dessert at breakfast or a snack, but it's yogurt. And then one of my favorites, and I think they'd say this too, is the peanut butter chocolate chip cookie dough. It's one of the few sweets that I have in there, but it is so good. I have to be careful when I make it. I have to put them in the freezer or the rest of them in the freezer. But it uses chickpeas.
Oh.
Yeah. And then peanut butter or almond butter, a little brown sugar, some almond milk, vanilla, salt, some old-fashioned oats, and then some dark chocolate chips. And the key is really pureeing the chickpeas, getting them very smooth so you don't have any lumps or anything. But I promise you cannot tell there are beans in the cookie dough at all. They are really, really just almost decadent tasting.
Now, do you freeze them or refrigerate them?
I designed them to refrigerate them, but I started freezing them so they wouldn't be so easy for me to grab and eat. And actually, I found that they tend to keep better in the freezer, and I kind of like them frozen too. So I keep them now in the freezer if they thaw pretty quick. So you can just kind of pull one out when you want it.
Oh, yum. I have a recipe on my blog for a lightened up 7-layer bar. And around the holidays, everybody, makes the 7-layer bars. And it still is made with sweetened condensed milk, but I use the lower fat one or lower sugar. I can't remember. Just get the quote unquote healthiest version you can find. That's not the healthy part of the recipe, but I do add chickpeas to it and I mash them up. Same thing. And there's nuts in there and dried fruit and oats and some mini chocolate chips. So it's kind of similar. Oh, and some shredded coconut, which I do love. And I think I used sweetened, but now I'm totally into the unsweetened. Like, why not? So it's similar in a way, but it's like in a bar.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I think chickpeas are interesting. They make their way into all sorts of recipes, like really versatile. They, especially in desserts, right? Who knew? Who knew? So in a perfect world, Carolyn, do you think everybody should be eating an anti-inflammatory diet? I mean, I've done a show on brain health and similar, like these foods start popping up. It really sort of feels like more of a Mediterranean style diet. But do you think this is something that families should just do from the get-go? Because inflammation builds up over time. We want to kind of get ahead of it.
Yeah. This is, I hate to call it a diet, but just incorporating more anti-inflammatory foods and trying to, eat a little less of those inflammatory ones, I think really is beneficial for everyone and all ages, even kids, in all health conditions, whether you're healthy now and just want to stay that way, or if you have a certain condition. But yeah, this is really at the root of most everything, or it can, let me phrase that differently, it can somewhat exacerbate what you may already have, and make it a little worse or the symptoms worse. So yeah, reducing inflammation, is really key, no matter, if you're concerned about, like you said, brain health or, heart health or autoimmune or, just staying healthy and feeling good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, it's this Mediterranean kind of a diet, or maybe even if you're eating an Asian style diet, it's always about the veggies, right? Mm-hmm. We always want to get more veggies in the diet. That is the key. Yes.
Yeah. It's I called it kind of a modified Mediterranean approach. Mm-hmm. A little more emphasis on the produce and the really super colorful ones. But yeah. Yeah, similar to a Mediterranean.
Right, because in the Mediterranean, they're going to eat a lot of charcuterie and cheese, and they'll have lots of dairy. It depends where in the Mediterranean, certainly. And you have meat in the book or no? Like, what's your stance on meat?
Mm-hmm. I do. I am very much every food can fit. Mm-hmm. I love red meat. I love beef. And it's not something I'm going to give up, but I do want to reduce inflammation. So, there's a way to work it in. I really wanted this book to show that it's not all or nothing. You don't have to, just go, quit the dairy, quit the gluten, go completely vegetarian. It's not necessarily about that. But on a daily basis, it is about, choosing more of these foods and decreasing those ones that do increase the inflammation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, the fact that you make the recipes so easy and accessible, that's the beauty of the book. And that's what I love most about it, because I'm an empty nester now, but I still don't want to spend hours in the kitchen. So why not, make it simple and beautiful. It's a powerful book. The recipes are phenomenal. And I'm very particular when it comes to recipes because I can spot a good one from a bad, and your recipes are phenomenal. And I've really had so much fun cooking from the book, and I will continue cooking. I'm going to make those peanut butter chickpea balls when Simon's home for the holiday break. He'll be enjoying those. So, but Carolyn, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was so interesting, and I'm really glad we had a chance to connect.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right. And to all of my listeners, I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have and learned a lot because there's just so much to learn. Maybe we've just really scratched the surface for you, but so many great recipes. I will give you all the resources and links in the show notes from today's show. So be on the lookout for that at lizshealthytable.com/podcast. Thanks for listening. If you love the show, tell a friend about it, post a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, thanks for listening to Liz's Healthy Table.